Not the big show, Michael. It's Big Ten Today, and I'm Mike Hall. It's fueled by Gatorade. Thrilled to have you with us here for the next hour on the Big Ten Network. We're coming at you from our Chicago studios. Lincoln Riley up in a matter of moments. Plenty of lacrosse, plenty of baseball as well. But we start things off on the gridiron. We are in a busy weekend of Big Ten football action with spring games, and it is our big story. Spring football all around. Bunch of stuff happening this weekend, including last night when Indiana had their spring game. Notable, of course, because it's the first one under the tenure of new head coach Curt Cignetti. Comes to Indiana after a 52-9 record in his 5 years at James Madison. Pat Boylan with the Hoosiers after Thursday night's action.
Coach, what caught your attention here tonight?
Well, we got off the field without getting anybody hurt, which is a big plus, and we accomplished that all spring long. And we really made progress in a lot of areas as a football team. You know, tonight's not perfect. You know, I'm sure there's good, bad, and ugly. We had key guys out. It's going to look a lot better in the fall. And but you know, there was some nice stuff out there. And I'm trying to figure out if our two offenses that good or our two defenses that bad. I think I know the answer to that question.
When you took over this program, you talked about a necessary mindset change as you move into the summer here. How key is that mindset going to be to seeing the type of growth you're hoping for?
Oh, it's the whole deal. And we've made significant strides since December 1st. We're not there yet. We got a long way to go, but we don't need to be there right now. We need to be there when we run out that tunnel in that first game and then learn from every moment there on out, okay? But we got to make a lot of progress in a short amount of time.
A touchdown for you, a win for the offense. You had to be pretty pleased with how today went.
Yeah, man, I felt, man, it was amazing just being with the guys and being able to be out here and be able to showcase what we can do. We, like Coach Cignetti said, I mean, we're so far from where we want to be, but we just had that consistent hunger to change the atmosphere here in Indiana, and we're excited for this season. I know every last one of us have things to work on, and I'm excited for the summer, man. I'm ready to get back to it and work on my game, and all of us work on all of our games. And, man, and we go ahead and we punch people in the face. So I hope that's the plan.
Busy Saturday of football in the Big Ten. Look at all these different spring games and spring practices happening across the league. And that includes USC having their spring game. That's at 3 o'clock Eastern time, 2 Central. You look at the offense that USC has. It's been pretty darn good under Lincoln Riley. Going back to 2022, number one in the country, 41 points per game. They have been electric and exciting to see on offense, and now we get to see them join the Big Ten. Head coach is our big interview. It is Trojan Lincoln Riley, who's good enough to join us from L.A. Lincoln, let's look back at last season. What would you say is the biggest thing you learned from last year?
I think you learn a lot every year. I think that's kind of part of your continual growth as a coach, as players, and then certainly part of your growth as a program that we're trying to reestablish and trying to, in some senses, obviously bring back. And so obviously the margins are thin. You know, my experience at different places and being in those situations where you're going to play, you know, those big time games in the second half of the season that a lot's riding on, and you got to be at your very best, and you got to be at your very best on all three sides to take advantage of those opportunities. You know, we've had 2 years where we've put ourselves in a lot of those. We won a few more of them the first year. We lost a couple last year that were really, you know, some heartbreakers, some ones right there at the end that were one play away, and that can be the difference. And so, you know, it's motivated us to continue to build this program, to continue to strengthen our roster. We obviously made a lot of changes on the coaching staff on the defensive side that we're really excited about and looking forward to this new challenge in the Big Ten.
Yeah, you mentioned the change on the defensive side. You brought in a new exciting defensive coordinator who knows how to be good in the city of Los Angeles. What has you feeling most confident about your defense this coming year?
Well, I think the overall collection of the defensive staff, which when we pressed reset here defensively and started looking at you know, different defensive coordinators and position coaches that we would pair together, we shot for the stars. We really did. We you know, we're thankful to have a program and an administration here that believed in that vision, and we were able to put together just an outstanding staff. And you can see the development of our players and the confidence that's been developing this spring, which has been really exciting. And then a good mix of some players that have been good players for us that I feel like are developing and have a chance to play some of their best ball here at the end of their careers, along with some new talent that we brought in. And as you know, as the games have been played here these first few years, you've got your roster that's playing the majority of the snaps on Saturdays, but there's been a lot of excitement within the program about what's been developing kind of under the surface. And that's, you know, we've had 2 full recruiting classes now, and you can start to feel the depth and the talent that is coming. And the bowl game, you know, was a little bit of a precursor, a little bit of a preview for everybody to see, you know, this roster and kind of what's been working beneath the surface, because those were the majority of the guys that we played with in the win over Louisville, and a reason why there's a lot of optimism here and a lot of excitement about this season and the future.
You know, as we prepare for USC to join the Big Ten and become official in just a handful of months, I want to talk away from football for a second and have you help introduce USC to Big Ten viewers. Tell me about your campus. How do you describe it? What's it like?
It's one of those places that's difficult to describe, honestly. I mean, you feel like you're on a resort. Like it's I've never seen anything like it. It's an incredible, incredible campus. You know, and you get to feel right away when you drive in the gates here that you're at one of the most prestigious academic institutions on the planet, and you feel that, and you're just in such a unique setting here that, you know, you can go visit 100 other schools, you can go see all kinds of different places, but you probably won't see anything else like this. And so we get that reaction a lot, whether it's a recruit coming in or somebody that hasn't been on our campus before. It's an incredible place. It really is. It's one of one. And I know for all the different people that'll come in from Big Ten country coming in to watch these different games here, I think they'll enjoy being able to come out to LA and experience, you know, USC and this area in general.
Give me your favorite spot to go, whether it's on a walk or a bike ride or to grab a burger or whatever.
Man, I mean, sitting down in the South Bay, you know, whether, you know, Manhattan Beach, you know, Redondo Beach, any of those areas there for me, and watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean is pretty tough to beat, man. It's a surreal place, and there's so many other things to do and see here, but if I had to pick my favorite, that's pretty tough.
Yeah, it's a pretty good thing to sell, too, the sunset on Redondo Beach. For those who've only seen the Coliseum on TV but have never been there in person, what's the best part about that building you call home?
I think the combination of, one, the history of it, right? We're in an era where there's so many new stadiums and kind of modern stadiums that are popping up that are cool, but they don't have history, you know, and they don't have the same character and feel. And this one is, you start talking about a place that's hosted 3 Super Bowls, you know, it's getting ready to host its 3rd Olympics. That you've had people like, you know, Martin Luther King, you know, Nelson Mandela, I mean, the Pope, I mean, you know, JFK, I think, accepted a Democratic nomination there. Like, I mean, it's like you walk down those steps, you feel it. I mean, that's you know, you get goosebumps. I mean, it's an incredible place. And you think about all the history and all the things that have happened there, and to think like that's our home is pretty incredible. So it's a unique setting. I think everybody that hasn't been there before, like, it's one of those bucket list places that you have to come watch a college football game at, because, I mean, you're seeing a great product on the field, and you're also getting a chance to do it in a really, really special and historic place.
Your school has a new men's basketball coach, Eric Musselman. You met him yet?
We haven't got to meet face to face. We've talked on the phone, had a chance to text a little bit. I know how it is to take the new job, and you know, you're drinking out of a fire hose there for a while. So he's in the middle of it as he's building his roster and his coaching staff. But yeah, I know he brings a ton of energy, a great reputation. We have some mutual friends from the Broyles Award in Arkansas. Some people that are very, very close and dear to me and my family that know him well. So that was a great introduction as well. And yeah, excited to pair up with him. Obviously, you know, that's a major sport here. It's really important. And I know, you know, Coach is going to bring a ton of energy, and look forward to collaborating and working with him.
Speaking, we're here in Chicago, and there's a former quarterback of yours who, let's just say, is likely to be playing for the Chicago Bears in a very short amount of time. He'll be drafted number 1. All signs seem to say next Thursday. What is it like for you as a former coach to be in that position where your guy's about to go number 1?
Yeah, it's, I never count it until it happens, so I know everybody else is, but it's a great moment, man. I remember the first time it happened, with Baker, and we were all sitting in his, in his living room, and that one was a little bit of a surprise, and so it's a great moment, and I mean, honestly, yeah, I mean, the guy's going number 1 overall and all.
What's that like, though, when you're in your old player's living room or you're at the draft with them? Like, what is that feeling like?
Yeah, it's a little surreal in that you really think about like the journey, at that point, from, a recruiting conversation when you first meet them, or a, meeting in your office when they come up on that first visit, and it kind of goes full circle. Like, these things of, winning championships in college, or winning a Heisman, or, being an All-American, or going high in the NFL draft, like those are all dreams that you want to accomplish. And then to come full circle and like actually be in that moment, that you talked about is a really, really special thing. I've tried, we've been lucky and we've had a couple. I've tried to definitely never take it for granted, because you know how special it is and how hard it is to do. And, but most of all, you're just happy and appreciative and excited for these guys to get that chance.
We talked a moment ago about your quarterback positions. Give me a position group on your team this spring that has impressed you.
I've been impressed with a lot of them. I mean, I would zero in on our linebackers. Been really, really impressed with that group, their consistency of play, their ability to make explosive plays. We brought in Matt Entz from North Dakota State, who was the head coach there, and obviously, won multiple national championships, a fabulous coach, and he's come in and taken over our linebackers, and really feel like he's done a tremendous job with their development. We've got a couple of guys that have been here and on the roster that have played a lot of snaps for us, like a Mason Cobb and like an Eric Gentry, that I feel like are, this spring was probably the best ball that we've seen them play, and we feel like they're climbing. We're really excited about Easton Arnold, that came in from Oregon State, who's got a lot of leadership qualities and has played a lot of snaps under his belt. And those three really have played at a high level. And then there's some new exciting young talent in that room that has gotten better. And I feel like they're going to have a chance to really make an impact for this football team that are developing fast as well. So I could certainly single out every group in some way, but the linebackers have been particularly impressive for me this spring.
Well, I think it's interesting. We talked earlier about the importance of defense this year, and you bring up the linebacker crew as the unit that stands out. One of our analysts was telling me yesterday, when he's been watching, he likes the DBs. Guys like Ramsey and Covington have really stood out as well. What do you see with them?
Yeah, I think you feel the impact of, having Coach Lynn, and certainly, obviously he's involved in coaching the entire defense, but his specialty and his background exists in the secondary. And then also, Doug Belk. I mean, that's just a great 1-2 punch in terms of coaching and developing our guys there. And similar to linebacker room, I've just seen a lot of guys climb. I see a lot of guys that I feel like are starting to really come into their own as players, combined with some new faces like Kamari Ramsey and Akili Arnold, John Humphrey, DeCarlos Nicholson. I mean, it's a good group. It is. And I think they've really taken to what we're doing schematically. I think they've really taken to what we're teaching from a fundamental standpoint, which both of those are certainly there's some key differences compared to what we were doing before. And yeah, so far a lot of production, and I think a lot of confidence that's being built there. So yeah, I mean, there's not any level of the defense that we're not excited about the progress and excited about the way that those guys are being developed.
Last thing for you here, Lincoln. I know spring games have changed over the years. Your spring game's coming up on Saturday. I'm curious what your goals are. I know number 1 is 0 injuries, but what would be 2 and 3 after that?
Well, it's the first time and really the only time, because we don't have preseason games. We don't have scrimmages like you do in high school. And so it's really our first and only time with the team to get out in a game setting with people in the stands, with it on TV, all of that, before you actually do it for real. And I think especially some of these freshmen that are in here, these guys that haven't played college football yet, like a chance for them to feel that is really, really important. I think anytime you get in this setting, you want to see guys be able to take what they've learned in the meeting rooms or what they've learned on the practice field and how can they take it to the game field when you get in that type of setting. And so I think those are our two biggest goals. And obviously we got a lot of guys that are excited about it. And yeah, hopefully we have a great day, very productive day. And like you said, keep everybody healthy and get on into summer conditioning.
Lincoln Riley, Trojan head coach. Thanks for your time, man. We appreciate it. Have fun tomorrow.
Will do. Appreciate you.
Everything in the world of lacrosse is our guy, Mark Dixon. It is the regular season finale this weekend. Mark, let's start off with the big one. You got Maryland at Johns Hopkins, top 2 in the league, top 5 nationally. Put into words exactly what's riding on this game.
Well, first of all, it's pride. Two tradition-rich programs that really hang their hats on this rivalry. And it's cliche, as you can imagine, Mike, but throw the record books out. This is the big one. And when you look at this, 2 years ago at Homewood Field, Maryland embarrassed Johns Hopkins 22-7. A year ago, the Blue Jays, what an incredible improvement from 22-23, knocked off the Terps in the regular season. And then Maryland returned the favor in the Big Ten tournament. So pride is the first thing. And then the other word I would use is crab. And that is that big 15 to 20 pound, 25 pound crab that the winner gets to take home. It's sitting on Homewood, in the Homewood campus right now in the Porter Center at Johns Hopkins for winning the regular season last year. Maryland would like nothing better than to bring that thing back down to College Park.
Yeah, nothing like trophy games in college sports for sure. We last talked on Sunday. You had a game where Hopkins was down by 5 against Ohio State and rallied back. What stood out to you in watching that up close?
What stood out to me was just the approach by Hopkins to stay the course, be patient, and then 3 big guys stepped up for the Blue Jays. Garrett Degnan scored some big goals, also made an incredible defensive play coming from the attack position over the midfield line to strip a Buckeye and get a critical possession back for the Blue Jays. But midfielders Jonathan Peshko and Matt Collison are 2 guys that really stood out. They showed up in the big moments. They used their size. They used their skill. And Collison eventually sealed the deal with his second game-winning overtime goal in as many weeks. Beat Penn State in that fashion at Homewood Field a week earlier, and then did the same at Ohio State Lacrosse Stadium to propel the Blue Jays to victory. So those, if you really boil it down, those are the things that stood out to me for Johns Hopkins coming back against a really tough Ohio State defense.
In this matchup, Maryland and Johns Hopkins, give me a strength of each team. Where does each team have an advantage in this matchup?
With Maryland, it's facing off with Luke Weirman. He has had an incredible career, and he gives Maryland what I like to call spurtability, the ability to run together 3-4 goals in 2.5, 3 minutes. We saw them do it against Michigan. We saw them do it against Penn State. We saw it last weekend as Maryland was able to do it against Rutgers. So facing off, Luke Weirman gives Maryland a decided advantage. For Johns Hopkins, it is the seniors and the leadership that they have on this team. Defensively, Bowden Zulik, Defensive Player of the Week in the Big Ten. Scott Smith. Chase Erlin is a 5th-year graduate student from Cornell. And on the other end, you got 5th-year seniors in Jacob Angelis and Garrett Degnan. So the experience, not only from a talent perspective and a lacrosse perspective, but that ache and that pain and that embarrassment of 2 years ago at Homewood Field, that is what's going to drive the Blue Jays.
When we're watching on Saturday afternoon, give me one player we have to keep an eye on in this game that'll help determine the outcome.
Wow, I think it's 2, and that's Chase Erlin, the netminder for Johns Hopkins, and Logan McNaney, the goaltender for Maryland. I think both goaltenders are going to have to be huge. Maryland is a little bit more opportunistic. Again, they can go dormant for 10, 12, 15 minutes. The Hopkins defense can't do that. They have to be on their toes because, again, when they score 1, 2 or 3 might be coming in rapid succession. Chase Erlin, he's the last line of defense, needs to be aware. Logan McNaney rounding into form after winning a national championship in 2022, All-American, All-Big Ten, torn knee last year, missed the season. He's getting better and better every week. This is a Maryland defense that's fantastic, but their short stick defensive midfielders sometimes can be attacked and can be vulnerable. That is when McNaney has made big saves in critical moments to keep Maryland in games, to let their offense catch up and do the job.
Again, that matchup comes your way Saturday afternoon. Those are not the only two teams in the Big Ten that are ranked in the top 10 nationally. Penn State, as we mentioned earlier, is as well. They're taking on Rutgers. Mark, when you watch Penn State this year, what impresses you most about them offensively?
TJ Malone. He is the guy. He is such a terrific player. He can do a little bit of everything. He can dodge, he can feed, he can score. And he has just such a wealth of experience. And you want to talk about a player who's been through it, years of injuries, only to come back stronger. Mentioned as a top 25 Tewaaraton finalist, along with his netminder, Jack Frassion. But he is not the only element of this Penn State offense. Matt Costin is terrific. He gives them depth of scoring. But really, at the end of the day, it's TJ Malone that is the maestro of that offense.
So after this, we've got the Big Ten tournament coming up. How many teams realistically have a shot to win this thing?
Let's look at a year ago. Michigan sitting at the number 4 seed coming into the tournament. They win a quarterfinal game against Ohio State. Then they beat the number 1 seed Penn State in the semifinals. Then they beat Maryland to go to their first ever NCAA tournament. So with that in mind, the Big Ten tournament is going to be gigantic. But right now, as we're sitting here on the precipice of rivalry weekend, it's 3 teams. It's Johns Hopkins, it's Maryland, and it's Penn State. And Hopkins could eventually be the number 1 overall seed if they take care of business. They've got a great RPI, their strength of schedule. They fit all the metrics. Maryland, I think, is on the line right now to host a home game, maybe around that 6, 7, 8 seed. Penn State, while I do believe they'll be on the road, they are an NCAA tournament team at this stage of the game. So right now there's 3, but there could be as many as 4, depending upon the results of the Big Ten tournament.
Now, you led me perfectly into my final question for you, which is the next thing on the calendar after the Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament. What do you think are fair expectations for the league in the NCAAs?
I think it is wide open. So last year, Virginia, Notre Dame, Duke, that trio was head and shoulders above everyone else. They're still very, very good. And right now, my number 1 team in the country is Notre Dame. But the gap between Virginia and Duke is not as wide as it was a year ago. So I think that the Big Ten could certainly do some damage. I definitely think for Hopkins and Maryland, quarterfinalists, Penn State as well. And then once you get to that round, anything can happen. Win that first game, win that first round game, and see what can happen. Hopkins hasn't been to the national semifinals since 2015. They have the tools and the experience to get back. Maryland, that magical team of 2 years ago, one for the ages, undefeated national champion, stubbed their toe in the first round against Army. Who knows what could have happened had Maryland gotten to the quarterfinals a year ago. And Penn State, they are one bad call away from continuing overtime, potentially beating Duke. And we might be talking about Penn State as a reigning national champion had that misfortune not happened on that overtime call against Duke. So I definitely think all 3 teams, as it stands now, could be quarterfinalists, and all 3 have what it takes to get to the national semifinals.
Mark Dixon, love hearing your insight, man. Thanks so much for your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Always good to be with you, Mike. Thanks so much.
I mentioned we had pretty wild this past weekend. Both Westcott and Schroeder hit 3 homers in the same game against NIU on Sunday. Hadn't happened for Illinois in any game since 2004, not by any Big Ten team since 2013. It's a good time to be an Illini fan in the world of baseball. Time for our big stat, fueled by Gatorade. Here's a look at the best home records in the Big Ten this season. It is really, really hard to beat Illinois in Champaign. 11-1 is their record on the year. With that in mind, we bring in our buddy Michael Huff to talk Big Ten baseball. And you look at the Big Ten standings, Illinois is right there at the top of the standings all by themselves. But you kind of take a step back and try to figure out how good is this team. And you look at their non-conference record. 11 losses in non-conference play that might stick out, but you look a little deeper at those losses, don't you?
Well, you think about those 11 losses, and again, very frustrating because you have a ball club right now that is playing so well, sitting at the top of the standings in the Big Ten. Of those 11, 5 of them came against nationally ranked teams. So you almost want to tip your cap and say, okay, early in the season, Northern School going south. 2 other games that they lost were to a Florida State team who is now 30-6, Indiana State team that has over 20 wins versus losses, 27-7. Another 2 losses to teams that are 5 or 10 games over 500. So when I take a step back, I say, you know what? 9 losses to really good ball clubs. Would have liked to have seen a couple ways to find 1 or 2 wins, but in some ways I can say this is preseason. The reason we go south is to learn and iron a few things out. Coming to the Big Ten, they've ironed them out, I think.
Well, and that's the thing. Teams progress at different times during a season, and Illinois right now seems to be progressing a lot. They've won 10 of their last 11 games. How for real are they?
Well, I do think they're for real. When you think about a ball club that has that many home runs, 1 through 9 in the order, that when you talk about team home runs, these guys are 15, 20 more than the second best Big Ten team. And there's a lot of good hitting ball clubs in the Big Ten right now. So the way you are 11-1 at home, the way the weather is starting to warm up, the way when you have gone on the road so far, you have won a series at Indiana, who I think is arguably one of the best hitting ball clubs, taking 2 out of 3 from there. I do think Dan Hartleb has these guys playing the right way, and I think they do deserve to be at the top of the order right now.
Yeah, you point out how great they are at hitting home runs. If you look at the individual statistics in the Big Ten, the top 4 home run hitters in the Big Ten, 3 of them are wearing orange and blue this year, Schroeder, Mormon, and Westcott. And with that in mind, the idea of home runs got our producer John Bolfin thinking. He was like, I want to put a scenario to you, Michael Huff. Let's say if anyone in the Big Ten on your team, it's the bottom of the 9th, you're down multiple runs.
Yep.
So you not only need a clutch hit, you need a clutch home run. Who are the guys you're most going to go to? Give me 1, 2, and 3 in order. We'll start with number 3.
Okay. If you have, let's say, a guy on first and second, and you're losing by 3. My number 3 hitter is going to be Adam Ciceri. Adam is the Wake Forest transfer at Penn State that right now is tied for first 12 home runs. So he is the type of guy that has experience, that has played on a national scale. And if I'm a coach seeing him walk up with a couple guys on base, I'm going to be a little bit nervous. He comes in at number 3. Number 2 is going to be Tony Santamaria at Rutgers. Now, this redshirt sophomore, I feel like he's been playing for 5 or 6 years.
It does feel that way.
Because every time he comes up, he's coming up in a clutch situation and leading this team in RBIs that just somehow he always comes through. Again, 10 home runs, so he's tied for 4th in the Big Ten. So we know he has that long ball power. Talking to scouts, they see it. He's someone that they project going forward. Right now, my number 1 guy that I do not want to face is Jacob Schroeder from Illinois. You talked about the fact that Illinois has 3 guys that are in the top 4 for home runs. Jacob right now only has 10 as compared to 12 or 11. But this young man has only really played in 20 games. Santamaria 36, Ciceri 33. 21 games,
right, yeah.
Right, it's a third of the games, and he has 10 home runs. We saw the 3, but he has power, as we saw earlier in these highlights, that can go to right center, that can pull a ball to left. And so as a coach, if I see him on the mound, 2 guys on, I might actually be thinking about just walking him and getting to the next guy, as long as it's not Moorman or Westcott.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. 20 games versus 36 makes a 12 to 10 home run difference.
It seemed irrelevant, totally irrelevant.
All right, so that's your power hitters. What about your clutch hitters overall? Let's just say you're tied in the 9th.
The Mike Huff type, the line drive guys?
The Mike Huff types.
Okay,
just slap me a single. Give me 3, 2, 1.
Well, 3, again, this is a lot of fun because now you can truly start to say, who are those guys that are going to come through in the clutch with that line drive? Can they go opposite field? Can they pull the ball? Are these guys tough to strike out? So number 3 for me right now is Raider Tello from Iowa. I mean, right now he is sitting at 41 RBIs, which is 4th in the Big Ten, hitting a cool 368. So, that doesn't stink. But this redshirt junior, again, I feel like he's middle of the order. He's that guy that not necessarily going to crush home runs, but he is definitely someone that's going to be getting that clutch RBI. And because he's been around for a few years, no pressure, he just knows how to come through in that clutch. My number 2, ironically, is going to be a redshirt freshman, which I don't usually like to put a freshman or sophomore in a clutch situation like that. But when you look at what Luke Gaffney is doing at Purdue right now, I mean, Greg Goff has to be so excited that he's going to have this guy for a couple more years, short of going into the draft early. As a redshirt freshman, he's hitting over 400, literally a number 2 in the Big Ten, 417. He's second in hits with 60. He's first in RBIs at 47, and he only has 19 strikeouts. So here's someone that in clutch situations, hitting in the middle of the order right now, is coming through consistently, and it's very difficult to strike out, which then leads me to number 1, which I'm pretty sure most people are guessing is going to be one Josh Kuroda-Grauer. We'll talk about the numbers in a second. This guy only has 10 strikeouts on the year. So when I see someone that can either lead off, can hit 5 or 6, getting used a lot in that 3-4 slot. Here is somebody that is coming through both pulling a ball, going up the middle, going opposite field. He is hitting 455 on the year. That's freaking ridiculous. I mean, I couldn't do that in Nintendo right now. 71 hits, which shows you how far ahead of Luke Gaffney he is, who has 60, first in the Big Ten. And again, 39, 40 RBIs, but this was a guy that coming into this year, last summer was out in Cape Cod, the Wooden Bat League, arguably the most competitive of the 3, 4, 5 collegiate leagues, got the MVP. So if there's a guy on second, we talked about maybe walking someone with guys on first and second up by 2, like a Jacob Schroeder. I am definitely walking Josh. If we're winning by 1, there's a guy on second and there's 2 outs and first base is open, I'm just saying take the pass.
A 4.55 average.
Yeah, just ridiculous.
And 71 hits. And those 71 hits, I mean, he's just well ahead of second place on the hits. Just a great season for Kuroda-Grauer for sure. All right, we're not done with Michael. He's coming back in just a little bit to talk some more baseball. Yeah, Saturday it is, the Illinois football spring game. Illini coming off a 5-7 season last year, which included wins over Indiana and on the road against the Gophers and the Terrapins, but they are looking for a higher mark this year. For more on that, we check in with our Jay Lehman on what to watch for this weekend.
Thanks, Mike. We're looking at Illinois football. There's 3 things I'm looking for when it comes to them in spring football and heading into fall 2024. First and foremost, it has got to be the defense. The defense was sensational in 2022. In 2023, took a step back, and they've got some big holes to fill, especially up front. Johnny Newton's going to the NFL. Keith Randolph's going to go to the NFL. Those 2 guys that were pillars in the middle of that defense are gone. They had a lot of defensive back woes. Now they retooled the coaching staff, brought in a new outside linebackers coach, a new inside linebackers coach. What will that identity of that defense be? It's been historically, hey, man coverage and being aggressive. Now, they got burnt on that last year. How are they going to change schematically, and how are they going to be physical at the point of attack and create the turnovers they did in 2022? Secondly, we got to look at the offense and Luke Altmyer. Luke Altmyer was one of the best quarterbacks in the West Division last year. But that doesn't matter. There are no more divisions, and Luke Altmyer is finally going to be healthy. He was banged up the last 2 or 3 games of the season. John Paddock took his job. But at the end of the day, Luke Altmyer is the guy that's going to make Barry Lunney's offense run. Barry Lunney, I believe, is going to have a more dynamic passing attack in 2024. They do lose Isaiah Williams, but they've got some weapons in Pat Bryant and some transfers, as well as Malik Elsley and Ashton Hollis at the receiver position, that I think they could throw the football all over the yard. And lastly, this is year 4 under Brett Bielema. Had some early success in year 2 with the ReliaQuest Bowl berth that they had and having an 8-win season. Felt like they took a step back in year 3. These are largely all of Brett Bielema's guys, all of Brett Bielema's recruits out of high school, all of his transfers, and the coaching staff that has his imprint on it all over the place. I'll be interested to see in this retooled 18-team Big Ten field how Illinois stacks up and how they look in year 4 under Brett Bielema.
Well, Jay, Bielema's been there for a bit. Very different scenario on the Michigan State side of things, though both have spring games this weekend. For the green and white, brand new head coach Jonathan Smith left Oregon State to come to East Lansing, trying to get MSU back to where they belong after 2 straight years of missing bowl games. Here's a bit of a glimpse of the offense that Smith is bringing to Michigan State. That's Antonio Gates Jr. with the grab. Let's go back to Jay now, get his thoughts on what he expects in year one of the new regime.
Thanks, Mike. Let's talk Sparty. Listen, I've been looking forward to Michigan State, getting back to the Michigan State of the 2010s. You know, physical, hard-nosed defense that runs the football and has great quarterback play and is in the mix in close games all the time against tough competition. The last 3 or 4 years, we simply did not see that from the Spartans. Yeah, they had one great year under Mel Tucker, but the reality is, against good competition, they weren't even close the last year or two. And offensively, they have been anemic, scoring under 16 points a game, 288 yards a game. So in comes Jonathan Smith. Listen, he took an Oregon State team that won one game prior to him coming to winning 10 games in year 4 or 5 after he got there. Okay, he's a guy that can turn around programs, and I believe offensively he's more balanced than you think he is. They're going to run the football. They're going to throw the football. I think he's the right guy for the job. He's done well in the transfer portal, brought in Aiden Childs as well at the quarterback position from Oregon State, a big-time transfer quarterback. I'd like to see what he does throwing the football in this new retooled Spartan offense. And here's the deal. They've got to be closer in games, because if they're close in games, I believe Jonathan Smith has the wherewithal and the skill and the brains as a coach to really win games down the stretch, just like he did when he was in the Pac-12 with Oregon State. I'm excited to see this new era of Michigan State football.
Good stuff, Jay. Thank you very much, buddy. By the way, speaking of the green and white, Spartan track and field star Heath Baldwin made some history. His decathlon score Thursday broke personal, school, and Big Ten records, lining him up nicely for the 2024 Tokyo Summer Olympics. The Paris Summer Olympics. He now meets the Olympic standard and makes him the current Team USA Decathlon Olympic Trials frontrunner for the upcoming games in Paris. In women's lacrosse, Penn State trailed by 4 in the first half, then went on an 8-0 run to get the W. They clinched the 2 seed on Senior Day and got their first win versus Johns Hopkins since April 18th, 2019, exactly 5 years ago. Getting ready for women's lacrosse Big Ten tournament. Here are the standings, and next to it the seed range based on what happens in the final couple of days. Oddly enough, Michigan can be either the 1 or the 4. If they win Sunday, it's the 1, and it's their first ever Big Ten regular season outright championship. But if they lose, a big drop all the way down to the 4 spot. A Northwestern victory gives them the regular season title. Game. Guess what? We can help you out. So much on the line. We have a network for that. It's called the Big Ten Network, and you can watch the season finale Sunday, noon Eastern, 11 Central, between Michigan and Northwestern right here. Let's go back to baseball now. You look at the leaders for strikeouts thrown in the Big Ten. You see 5 players from 5 different schools, but alone at the top is Brody Brecht, Iowa's junior, who was a first-team All-Big Ten player last year, so that's no surprise. But that's where the good news ends. The bad news is Brecht is injured. His coach said he has a minor oblique strain. So he was moved to a Sunday start this past weekend. This upcoming weekend is Rutgers, and he's listed as questionable to pitch on Sunday. And you and I have been talking the last couple of weeks about Brody Brecht. I mean, Iowa in particular, that their pitching has been disappointing compared to what you thought it would be. Does this help explain why Brody hasn't been, I mean, again, strikeouts are still there.
Strikeouts are still there,
but there are different stats that are important to the pitcher that are not there for him this year.
Right, and that big one is innings pitched. He's only got 40 innings pitched. So of those 5 guys that you just listed, he has the fewest number of innings, which shows how much talent when he is still number 1 in strikeouts. I think the oblique probably does explain a few things, that he may have been overcompensating a little bit here, a little bit there. Again, 32 walks in those 40 innings, not really being able to get into a 5th or 6th inning consistently. So this was an Iowa club that had Cade Obermuller, you had Marcus Morgan, and with Brody. So you really felt like these 3, again, arguably as good as any 3 of any school in the country, were going to propel Iowa to that top spot halfway through this year, which they're not. Here's the good news for Rick Heller, a bunch of the other pitchers, is that you have a bunch of good solid arms. And now one of these young guys who has been sitting there looking at these power three has a chance to step up. And my hope is that you sit Brody for a couple weekends. Yeah. And you need him healthy when he gets to the tournament, because if those three arms can get healthy in the tournament, especially led by Brody, you have a chance to run the table and get to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, Brecht, we saw the strikeouts were good. Also, third most walks allowed in the Big Ten. You got to think that's part of why that injury has been affecting his performance. The schedule this weekend is busy. We mentioned Illinois in first place. They'll be taking on Northwestern in Champaign this evening. This is all of your Friday action. Nebraska is in second place. They have Maryland at home, and late this evening on BTN, it's Penn State against Michigan State. Talk to me about Maryland and Nebraska. Huskers, the second place team. What do you want to look for in this game?
Well, I want Nebraska to get back to those national rankings. They lost 2 out of 3 at Rutgers, and one of those they were leading by 3 runs going into the 9th. And Nebraska has a committee that closes games. So Will Bolt has lots of options when it gets to that 9th inning, 8th inning, and for some reason, tip your cap to Rutgers, they were able to come back. So now that Nebraska is going home, can they take 2 out of 3? If they sweep, I'd like to think they're back into that national rankings. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens out there.
Right. It is interesting with this Husker program. A week ago, we're talking, well, they're the only Big Ten team that's in the rankings. Now they've lost 5 of their last 6 games overall.
Kind of crazy. And for Maryland, you really are thinking you're 10 games over 500. So how do we get back on the winning side? You just lost 2 out of 3 at Northwestern. So now how do we get back into that winning mode? Can I take 2 out of 3? Can I extend that 10-game 24-14 and start to feel like this club that preseason we all thought they were?
Yeah, that's a big one. Also interesting, Ohio State and Michigan, 2 hot teams. You got Michigan, who's won 6 of the last 8.
Well, and it's Michigan, Ohio State. I mean, you almost can throw out the records, the rivalry alone. So for these kids, there's going to be a lot of angst, a lot of oomph going into that series.
Buckeyes won 6 of the last 7. Third place versus fourth place. A lot of good baseball action this weekend. For Mike Huff, I'm Mike Hall. Thanks so much for watching our show.